Our boy Victor, aka the Horse, has led me down the sweet path of the Golden Sun once more, allowing me to win my local skirmish and bring home that cold foil blaze. Admittedly, a couple of days up to my skirmish, I was testing with KO and Zen because they both seem very broken and very fast in the current Blitz metagame, but I did the thing I always do where at the last minute I just decided to play Victor because it's what I'm most comfortable on, and thankfully I did because I have a new cold foil to show for it. Before we get into a round by round breakdown of my skirmish, I want to give a big shout out to the Blue Post and Elizabethan. Richard Oakes is a personal friend of mine, and he really went above and beyond to make sure that we had a great skirmish this season, throwing in some extra prize support and making sure that everybody felt at home in his shop. Round 1, I got paired into OG Dash, and honestly, I was able to get this win because I was living it up in High Roll City for the first 3 to 4 turns of the game. I did win the die roll, which allowed me to go first, denying Dash the ability to set up an additional item on turn 0, which is a big W for us as Victor to start the game out. Now from there, it was Debilitate into Pummel, which did give the -2 effect and took a card from my opponent's hand. On the following turn, I didn't have anything in Arsenal or set up already, and I drew into Command and Conquer Pummel. Now, I threw the Command and Conquer after making a surge, and then my opponent made a calculated risk of blocking with 2 pieces of equipment and a card from hand. The calculated risk there is that I don't have the Pummel because they did block with their crown, but they chose not to crown because their hand was like 20 to 25 points with the maximum velocity attached to it, and which is pretty impressive considering they're still blocking with a card from hand. Unfortunately for them, I did have the Pummel. This gets a twin drive out of Arsenal, and it gets a card out of their hand and puts them down to a pretty low life total, really putting me in the driver's seat, and I was just able to use my equipment the rest of the game to really make sure that I brought it home. Round 2, I played against a Dorinthia, and I have to say I was surprised when my opponent flipped over Decimator Great Axe. I was expecting to see Dawnblade, so it really threw me for a loop to start out the game there. Now, I was still able to get there. It took about 10 to 12 turns of us grinding it out back and forth, but I was able to get there in the end. Some cards that really help in that matchup are Enlightened Strike and Rouse the Ancients. Anything with Go Again gives you a lot of value and can really take a lot of cards from your opponent's hand, giving you solid tempo. Round 3, I played against Enigma New Moon. If you've played Victor into Enigma New Moon, then you know it's an uphill battle the entire way. As you can guess, I was not able to close this one out. The game was really interesting, though, because we were having a really good back and forth, and I felt like I was in a decent position for a moment. And then a hand came up where I wanted to play Rouse the Ancients. I could not play it because of my red count. I only played 20 blues in my deck, which probably did hinder me on this turn. But I made the decision that if I was to crack 2 golds, I might have been able to actually put together a Rouse turn, potentially clearing my opponent's board or taking all the tempo back in my favor. Unfortunately, I drew a blue into a red, which meant I was right back where I was, so I was only able to throw 8 and then Arsenal and try and set up. There was another awkward turn where I really wanted to play Visit Goldmane Estate to set up a 5th gold, making 5 might tokens, but again, it was the only blue in my hand, so low blue counts can get you in the end, and we had to take the L on the chin here. Round 4, I ran into a Blaze, and as you can probably guess, I wasn't able to close that one out either. Blaze is a pretty tough uphill battle for Victor as you're looking to apply pressure and keep blues in your hand while playing Oasis Respites, which normally you can't do all of that. The funny part about this game is that I had a pretty good draw and still fell short. I was able to play both copies of Visit Goldmane Estate, a Golden Sun, and 1 Oasis Respite, and I still died on turn 4. Now, after the match, my opponent and I were discussing if I would have been able to get there if I had drawn the 2nd copy of Oasis Respite on the last turn of the game, and it turns out I still would have taken exact lethal, which is really defeating to think about. Luckily for me, we were cutting to top 8, and I had won my first 2 rounds, which meant at a 14-person tournament, I was locked for top 8 regardless. In top 8, I ran into a Levia, and I was able to get there off the back of a mistake from my opponent. Now, when the game started, my opponent chose to go first. They leaked some damage on turn 0 by throwing a pulping at me. And then for the next 2 to 3 turns, we're kind of just playing a typical Guardian Brute game. We're blocking, we're swinging some back and forth. Then my opponent has a hand that only leaves me with 1 card. I pitched my blue to swing Titan's Fist for 4, but the important part here is that my opponent was at 17. They had a hand that they liked and they didn't want to block, but they didn't give me the husk or any other piece of equipment, and they fell down to 13. When they fell down to 13, they lost their husk at the beginning of their turn. I think this was just a small mental misstep for my opponent, as Blitz life totals are very different and you want to be able to keep the Husk as long as you can in CC, and my opponent losing the Husk gave me a lot of value and gave me a play to use my equipment on the following turn and then still throw 8 back at them. Top 4 was a rematch of the Enigma New Moon game from round 3. Now, my opponent was the higher seed and they chose to go second. Me going first allowed me to set up a Visit Goldmane Estate on turn 0 and then heave a Thunderquake. This put me in a very good position to just try and hit the ground running and push as much offense as we could. Now, the rest of the game was a slog. It was like probably a 15-turn game. There was a lot of back and forth, and I ended up fatiguing my opponent when they had all Chi left in their deck. We had a very hot start. I had a Command and Conquer Pummel to start the game. We had Rouse into another attack. We had E-Strike for Go Again. We were clearing the board and keeping it clear most of the game, really putting my opponent on the back foot and never letting them breathe. I was expecting to lose going into this match because it's such an uphill battle, but luckily we were able to have a very hot start, apply a lot of pressure, and keep the board clear. Although at the end of the game, my opponent did put double Manifestation of Miragai pitching 2 Chi into play, which was pretty scary. I was still at 15 when they made this play happen, and I was able to push a lot of pressure, and all they had were Chi left in their deck at this point in the game, which meant that after we cleared the board, it was just throwing hammer until we were able to win. In the finals, I got paired up against the OG Dash that I played in round 1. Now, I was able to bring this home, thankfully, but I gotta admit, it started out looking pretty rough. I blocked with my shield pretty early on, and then I drew into a Trounce. When I blocked with the Trounce, I revealed a 0 versus their 4. I broke my shield and then put that to the bottom. I revealed a 6. I win. These go to the bottom. And then I revealed a Visit Goldmane Estate, and we ended up tying. Not drawing the gold put me in a pretty rough spot, and it really allowed my opponent to take a lot of tempo. Now, thankfully, I have a ton of fridge against Dash, and pair that with the fact that they boosted away a lot of their good cards. They boosted away 1 High Octane. They boosted away a Scramble Pulse, like a Maximum Velocity. They boosted away a lot of their good red cards, which really took a lot of the gas out of their deck, which meant I was able to fatigue them at the end of the game. Now let's take a look at the deck and see any potential changes that we might want to make. So looking at our deck list here, let's just start at the top and let's work our way down. When we talk about our equipment and weapons, everything looks pretty standard here, except for one thing. Tectonic Plating stands out as something we do not play in CC that we do play in Blitz. I like the extra block value that you get from playing Tectonic Plating in Blitz since the format is so fast. I also think that Surges pair pretty well with cards like Chokeslam and Debilitate to be able to play 2-card 8s and really disrupt your opponents. The next card I want to talk about is Titan's Fist. A couple of people have asked me about playing Miller's Grindstone over Titan's Fist, and don't get me wrong, there are some good matchups you can run Miller's Grindstone into and really get a lot of value. Milling an Art of War off of a Zen gets a lot of value and can be a great feeling. Running Miller's Grindstone into decks like Rhinar, KO, or Levia feel really bad, and I think that the consistency that Titan's Fist offers you is better than the potential upside you can get from Miller's Grindstone. Our first line of cards here, we're looking at red Chokeslam and blues. Chokeslam's pretty on the nose. It's good into Zen. It can be good into other decks where they want to gain power. It has some play into Dash if you're trying to stop them from using Teklo Pounder. It's also good against all of the Blood Rush Bellow decks, so I'm a big fan of running red and blue Chokeslam in this list. Next is Command and Conquer. This is a card that needs no introduction. Command and Conquer is a great 2-card 6, or also pairs very well with Pummel to get a lot of disruption from your opponent. Next up is blue and red Debilitate. Now, blue Debilitate sees a lot of play in a lot of Victor decks. Red Debilitate does not always see play. I think with how fast the format is, a potential 2-card 10 is very good in a fast format and gives you a lot of play to really block and also have some good disruption to really slow down your opponent. Enlightened Strike. This is one of my favorite cards that not everybody's playing in the deck. E-Strike is a great 2-card versatile setup. If you know what's on top of your deck because of a clash, you can actually use E-Strike to draw a card and set up a good arsenal. This is always a good 2-card 7, or it's great go again into heroes like Enigma New Moon or Blaze. Next up on our list is Pummel. This card also needs no introduction. There's nothing like pummeling in Command and Conquer or even a Spinal Crush. You're getting a ton of value there and really setting yourself up to go far in the game. Next up is Spinal Crush. Spinal Crush is another one of those staple Guardian attacks that plays so well and gets a lot of value here. Now, if you made a Surge on the following turn, and you have 2 blues, a Spinal Crush, and a Pummel, you can actually play Command and Conquer Pummel, play Spinal Crush Pummel, getting a ton of value there and denying your opponent the ability to have go again. But normally, Spinal Crush gets enough value by itself that you don't need to pair the Pummel with it. Test of Strength has been a Victor staple since day one. Blocking 4 and potentially drawing you a card and generating the gold is exactly what we want to be doing with Victor, and will go a long way with letting us continue to play offense while we play defense. Next up on our list is Thunderquake. Now, Red Thunderquake is an interesting one because it's not always something that sees play in Classic Constructed, but throwing 10 at your opponent in a format where you only have 20 life or less is a really good place to be. There's no on-hits with Thunderquake, but it's a great card because most people block it due to the fact of losing so much life so early on in the game. The other big play that you get from Thunderquake is on turn 0, you now have more cards to heave, setting you up to have additional seismic surges, and let me tell you, there is nothing like throwing a red Thunderquake by pitching 1 blue. That's a feeling that I think everybody wants to strive for. Next up is Trounce. Trounce is a great card to block with and can give you a lot of value. If you have a blue Command and Conquer, Pummel, and you have a Trounce in hand, you can block with the Trounce, win the Trounce, block with the additional card that you draw, and then you can throw Command and Conquer Pummel as if Tunic was there. Now, I know that that's a lot of setup, but that's one of the many great ways that Trounce can see that really sets us up to get a lot of value in our Victor deck. Next up is the Golden Sun. The Golden Sun is a card that does not need introduction from Victor. This being a hopefully 2-card 10 with Overpower is great at closing games and also good at just pushing a lot of life and putting your opponent in an awkward position and forcing them to block when maybe they don't want to. The Golden Sun will probably always be a staple of Victor decks. Blue Cranial Crush, Blue Disable, Blue Macho Grande, they're just good blue cards that we should be playing in Victor because we need good blue poppers. And 2, they're just good blue value cards that let you throw 3-card 8s late in the game when all you have are blues. Rouse the Ancients was an interesting choice. This was almost Boulder Drop in my list, but I wanted the potential go again for the Guardian Mirror and for Enigma New Moon, and also for Blaze if it lines up correctly. Rouse the Ancients stood out really good for me this past weekend, and I really enjoyed playing the card, and it's not something I would change, even though I was questionable about it going into the weekend. Thunk is great because when you reveal it off of a clash, you win a Might. Wallop, another card that is great because when you reveal it, you create an extra Vigor token, which can kind of give you that pseudo Seismic Surge to throw Debilitate, to throw Chokeslam, to throw the Golden Sun by only pitching 1 blue. Visit Goldmane Estate is one of the best cards in the deck. This Mistveil expansion slot card has been an absolute all-star and staple of Victor since it came out. Creating Might tokens to apply extra pressure in the Guardian Mirror or against Enigma New Moon or against Blaze goes a long way and also sets you up with some additional gold generation. I'm expecting Visit Goldmane Estate to pretty much be in Victor for the rest of time. The last part of the deck that we're going to talk about is our inventory. You'll notice that there's only 2 non-equipment cards, and they are Oasis Respite. Oasis Respite is a very powerful instant that allows us to try and slow down our Blaze opponent, potentially giving us enough room to throw our attacks and close out the game before they can kill us with arcane damage. This is very good against Swell Tidings and Emeritus Scolding, as it almost covers up the entire thing. Crown of Dominion is one of those cards that I was kind of iffy on in Victor at first, but I've really grown to it. Playing this into Enigma New Moon and playing it into Blaze gives you a lot of value at having the extra gold, which means the first time you play a Visit Goldmane Estate, you don't need to have won a clash. You already have the shield and the gold from Crown of Dominion to have the necessary gold. And then we have AB through No Rune Boots, Gloves, and Robe. I like running Robe over the headpiece, which is a pretty traditional option. Most people run No Rune Hood, but running Robe here allows us to play AB3 and the Crown of Dominion and to Blaze, setting us up for the best start we can have against Blaze. Talking about changes to the deck, I'm going to be honest. If I was playing in another skirmish this coming weekend, I wouldn't make any changes. The deck felt great. I really enjoyed it. There might have been a couple of times when I wish I would have had more blues, so maybe you could add in a couple of more blues, but even then I probably wouldn't make that change. If I was going to add in 2 blues, I would probably add in 2 copies of Boulder Drop, cutting red Debilitates or Enlightened Strike, depending on what your meta looks like. If there's not going to be a lot of ninjas or there's not going to be a lot of aggro decks, you can probably cut the Debilitates. If you're not expecting there to be a lot of Blaze or you're not expecting there to be a lot of decks that you really want go again attacks into, then you could probably cut Enlightened Strike. But other than that, I think the deck is great just the way that it is, and I wouldn't really make any changes to it. Guys, let me know in the comments down below what cards you think might be missing, or if there are any just like glaring holes you see in my deck list. I'd love to hear about it. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe for more content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take it easy, guys.